I called my parents on the first Saturday of December, thinking we'd talk about what time to come over, what dishes I should bring, maybe even whether the kids could help set up the tree. It was just a formality, really. We'd spent every Christmas together since the kids were born quiet ones, mostly but consistent, predictable, safe. Mom picked up on the third ring, her voice brisk like she was rushing to finish something that couldn't possibly wait. "Hey, Mom," I said, smiling into the phone even though she couldn't see it. We were thinking of bringing the kids' presents over the night before, like usual. "Does that still work for you guys?" There was a pause, then a breath. "Delara," she said, tone-clipped. "Now's not a good time this year." I blinked. "What do you mean, it'll just be simpler with your sister and us? Things have been hectic and honestly, well, we just need quiet this Christmas." My hands tightened around the phone. I turned away from the kids who were giggling in the next room, taping handmade snowflakes to the window. "So, you don't want us to come?" It's not that she said too quickly. It's just easier this way. I said, "Okay," just like that. No raised voice, no argument. I said okay and wished her a good day. Then I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the floor for a long time. The kids had already wrapped their presents for Grandma and Grandpa, little drawings folded into cards. My daughter had even written, "For Grandpa. I love your old jokes in crayon on a shoebox full of peppermints." That night, after they were asleep, I scrolled through my sister Alex's Instagram. She'd already posted 4 stories. The house was glowing with lights. The tree was up, wine glasses clinked in boomerang loops, and there on the couch in our parents' living room was her coworker, smiling, holding a mug that said "Merry and Bright," and curled at her feet in a ridiculous reindeer onesie was a golden retriever with its own embroidered stocking above the fireplace. So, not enough room for me or my kids, but plenty for a woman I'd never met, and her dog. I turned off my phone, walked quietly into the cold night air, and looked at the car parked in my driveway. It started in February, one of those bitter Illinois mornings where even the sunlight looks cold. I had just finished a freelance deadline around 2 a.m. and was driving home when I spotted my dad walking along Route 19, hands buried deep in his coat pockets, head down like the wind was scolding him. I slowed as I passed, and that's when I saw it. The disappointment on his face, the kind of tired that doesn't come from distance, but from the weight of giving up. I knew what had happened. Their car, the old Taurus, had probably sputtered its last breath. Again. I didn't pull over. He didn't see me. But something about that moment anchored itself deep in my chest. The next morning, I opened a savings folder on my desktop and titled it Honda. Every extra job I could take, I took. Cover design rush fees, last-minute layout edits, even formatting ebooks for an influencer I couldn't stand. I sold a ring my grandmother left me, canceled a summer camping trip the kids had begged for, and stretched every grocery run with coupons and bulk beans. And somehow, slowly, the numbers grew. All while still sending my parents groceries, paying half their utility bill, and logging into their internet provider every other week to reset their Wi-Fi. By mid-December, I had enough. Not for anything flashy, just a clean, safe, gently used Honda Civic from a dealer I trusted. Low mileage, heated seats. I even paid extra to have it detailed. It sparkled. The dealer tied a red bow on top. The kids gasped when they saw it in the driveway. They thought Santa had dropped it off early. I told them it was a surprise for Grandma and Grandpa. We were going to drive it over Christmas night. That plan unraveled 3 days later when my mother said they didn't have room for us. I'd smiled through it then. But now, standing beside the car in the cold, I took out my phone, turned the camera on, and raised it slowly. I stood beside the car, the one thing I'd managed to give without being asked, without being thanked, without being noticed. The driveway was quiet. My breath rose in clouds, and the red bow fluttered slightly in the breeze. I lifted my phone and took the picture. The car, the bow, the snow, just beginning to fall. No caption, no explanation. I sent it to my mother. Then I turned the phone face down on the kitchen counter and made pancakes in silence. The kids, still in their pajamas, chased each other with whipped cream while a Christmas special played in the background. I smiled where they could see me. Behind the fridge door, I didn't. 10 minutes passed, then 15. The phone lit up like a firecracker. 24 missed calls. All from my mother. I didn't answer. I sat at the table and watched my son carefully place a strawberry on his snowman pancake. I poured coffee I didn't want and took sips I couldn't taste. Half an hour later, someone knocked. I opened the door, and there he was, my father. No coat, just a flannel under a gray hoodie, hands red from the cold chest, heaving like he hadn't stopped moving since he saw the photo. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask to come in. He just looked past me out toward the driveway. "Is this real?" he asked. I held his gaze. It was. He nodded once like a man who finally understood something too late. We stood there in silence for a moment longer before I stepped aside to let him in. The kids squealed when they saw him and ran straight into his arms. They didn't know they hadn't been wanted. They didn't know we weren't invited. He hugged them like a man clinging to a lifeline. And then while they showed him their paper snowflakes and pancake syrup art, he reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out 2 small gas station trinkets, a plastic dinosaur, and a tiny flashlight keychain. They lit up like it was gold. I watched from the kitchen and began making a second cup of coffee. One for him, one for me. Not because he asked, but because I needed this to stay civil. We sat at the kitchen table, the smell of burnt syrup and cinnamon still lingering in the air. I slid a mug toward him. He wrapped his fingers around it but didn't drink. I didn't ask why they'd left us out. I already knew. I just started talking. I told him about the night I saw him walking from the mechanics in February, how something in his face, the exhaustion, the quiet defeat, had lodged itself in me and never left. I told him about the file I created that very night labeled Honda, and how every late-night project, every rushed deadline, every ignored craving, every maybe later to the kids added up to that car in the driveway. I told him how I sold Nana's locket, how I canceled our summer camping trip, how I started buying dented cans at the discount grocery, how I worked through migraines and poured every cent I could scrape together into one quiet gesture. All for them. And then I told him how it felt to be told that we weren't wanted. Not enough room, not the right time. And then to see 11 people in their house, including a stranger and her dog, with stockings where my kids' names used to hang. He didn't interrupt. Not once. After a long silence, he said, "Your mother was just trying to make things easier," but his voice cracked halfway through like even he couldn't sell the lie. I looked him in the eye and said, "I'm returning the car. Even if it costs me a few thousand in restocking, at least I won't feel like a fool." He stared into his coffee, then nodded, slowly, like it hurt to do so. The kids came running back in, proudly showing off paper crowns they'd made from a leftover gift wrap tube. He hugged them tightly, then pulled on his hoodie and left without another word. I watched him walk down the driveway without looking back. I didn't feel relief, just a strange kind of stillness. That evening, my phone lit up again, but this time it wasn't him. By that evening, the buzz of my phone had turned from annoyance to something else entirely, a slow, deliberate unraveling. First came Aunt Cordelia's message, "I heard what you did." Delara. How could you? Then Cousin Bryce chimed in with, "You really thought it was okay to dangle a gift and yank it away like that. I hadn't said a word to anyone, but the narrative was already spreading like fire in dry brush. My mother had wasted no time. Suddenly, I was the villain, the bitter daughter who weaponized generosity, the manipulative one who ruined Christmas with her drama, the one who made her poor mother cry. Even her church friend Miriam sent a long message filled with faux concern and thinly veiled judgment. 'I hope you find peace, dear. Sometimes it's better to give without expecting recognition.' I didn't reply, not to any of them. I knew better. My sister, though she said nothing, not a word, not a text, not a single reaction. And that silence echoed louder than all the others combined. Alex always had something to say. Always. But not now. That was what made me uneasy. I sat on the couch while the kids built forts out of cushions and giggled under string lights I'd left up longer than usual. I held my phone scrolled past every accusation and turned it off. The next morning brought quiet. No pings, no buzzes, just the hum of the heater and the sound of cereal being poured. For a few hours it almost felt normal, until I opened the mailbox. There it was. A plain white envelope, no stamp, no return address. Just my name written in careful, practiced cursive I knew better than my own. I brought it inside and opened it slowly. Inside were 4 Polaroids. One of me as a little girl asleep on the living room rug. One of me and Alex at prom, awkward smiles frozen in time. One of my kids in my mother's backyard last summer. And one I had taken just days ago. The car, the red bow, my driveway on the back of it in black ink. So much hate for what the handwriting alone was enough to make my stomach twist. That looping measured script, the kind you only find on holiday cards and school permission slips, had always looked like it belonged in a greeting card aisle. But there it was centered neatly on the envelope, Dilara. I didn't open it right away. I stood at the counter, hands still cold from the mailbox, watching the kids build a Lego castle on the living room floor. They were arguing about turrets and dragons and who got the last blue brick. I wanted to stay in that noise, but my fingers had already started peeling the flat back. The first photo was me, maybe 6 or 7, passed out on the rug arms wrapped tight around my faded bear. My mouth hung open. There was a juice box near my head. I could almost hear my mom laughing softly behind the camera. The second prom night. Alex and I both in badly chosen dresses standing with awkward space between us. Our arms linked like it was a dare. The third, my kids last summer covered in popsicle stains, shrieking in the sprinkler in my parents' backyard. And then the fourth, the car, my driveway. The red bow still intact. The same photo I'd taken, the one I'd sent. My mother must have printed it out. On the back in dark ink. So much hate for what no signature, no explanation. Just that. I stood still for a long time, clutching the corners of the photos like they might crumble. My jaw locked. The words weren't meant as a question. They were a wound dressed as confusion, a paper knife pretending to be a ribbon. I slid the envelope into the drawer next to a stack of expired coupons and an old key I couldn't remember the use for. I pushed it closed and exhaled slowly. Later that evening after dinner, the doorbell rang. Not a text, not a call, just the chime I'd known since childhood. When I opened it, my father was standing there holding a paper bag like it might explain everything. He looked older than he had just days before. Not in the way people age over years, but in the way someone folds inward after too many sleepless nights. He held out a plain brown paper bag like it weighed more than it should. "I brought something for the kids," he said, his voice low. I took it gently and peeked inside. Coloring books, a couple of simple puzzles, and a familiar brand of washable markers my daughter adored. Tucked between them was a small envelope. Inside was a check for $500. The memo line read, "For the ones who matter." I didn't say anything, just stared at the writing, then back at him. "She found the title," he said quietly, "the one you left in the desk drawer last month, with the Medicare paperwork." My stomach dropped. "I didn't even realize it was gone," I whispered. He nodded slowly. "She thinks you're still giving them the car." That explained too much. The photo, the cryptic line, the sudden urgency to make me the villain. She hadn't given up control. She thought the car was still coming, that all of this was just noise before the reward. "She's not mad you didn't give it," he said. "She's mad you might not." He shifted his weight and added, "That's why she's rewriting everything." why she's calling everyone. She's trying to make sure you look like the one who changed, not her. I leaned against the counter and let the words settle. He wasn't just bringing puzzles. He was delivering the reason the walls were closing in. He didn't ask for the car, didn't even mention it again. Just said he'd stop defending her. When he left the bag still open on the table, I felt something shift. Not peace, not yet, but certainty. And the next day, as if the moment had been waiting for me to find that certainty, my phone lit up with her name. The notification came mid-morning while I was folding laundry. Alex added you to holiday healing. The name alone made my teeth clench. I clicked in. The first message was a selfie of my sister smiling next to our mom, both in matching plaid pajamas, underlined with trying to bring some love back into this season. Then came the commentary. Aunt Cordelia chimed in. Family is everything. We have to rise above negativity. Cousin Bryce added, holidays aren't about grudges, they're about grace. And then came the screenshots, carefully selected messages cropped to make it look like I'd lashed out without cause. Quotes pulled out of context. Lines where I'd finally spoken up framed as an emotional breakdown. One meme said, "Don't let bitter people ruin your sweet moments." Another, "You've poisoned the family dynamic." My mother, of course, never typed a thing. She didn't have to. Then Alex called. No greeting, no pause, just her voice sharp and purposeful. "Look, we've decided we're going to take care of groceries and errands from now on," she said, like she was announcing a grand gesture. "But you'll still need to handle the utilities and property taxes at least until things stabilize." It took everything in me not to laugh. I didn't ask what we meant. I didn't ask who put her in charge. I just said, no. There was a beat of silence, then a scoff. "Oh, come on. You're still mad. You think this makes you look strong?" I closed the laundry basket and set it on the floor. "I'm not trying to look strong," I said. "I'm just done." She exhaled like I was being dramatic, like I was the one rewriting reality. But I'd spent 2 decades playing nice, smiling through side comments, swallowing my worth to keep peace in a house that only ever cared when I was silent. Now they were finally listening, because I stopped speaking. And I wasn't finished yet. Alex's laughter was hollow. It had that rehearsed sharpness she used when she wanted to sound like she was above it all. "You really think this makes you look strong?" she said again, drawing out the last word like it tasted bad in her mouth. I didn't hesitate. "I'm not trying to look strong," I said. "I'm just done." The line settled between us like a closing door. I told her everything I'd held in for years about the birthdays they forgot, the calls never returned, the way I showed up again and again while she breezed through life, praised for every half-hearted gesture. I reminded her how I sent money when I barely had enough, stayed up resetting Wi-Fi, handled insurance paperwork, groceries, doctor appointments, the endless, thankless labor of keeping everything running for people who treated me like an afterthought. I said, "You didn't forget to include us. You chose not to, and you didn't choose peace. You chose comfort. You chose to keep the side of the family that doesn't ask hard questions." I could hear her breathing on the other end, but she said nothing. "You had room for a coworker's dog," I added, my voice low, "but not for your niece and nephew. Still nothing. This isn't revenge, I finished. It's freedom." Then I hung up. I turned my phone off, placed it in the drawer with the envelopes, the coupons, the rest of the noise I no longer needed to carry. The house was quiet except for the sound of syrup bubbling on the stove and the faint chatter of the kids in the living room. I flipped pancakes onto their plates, added strawberries on top like we used to, and called them in. They ran to the table still wearing mismatched pajamas, giggling as they argued over who got the bigger snowman. And I laughed, really laughed. Not the kind you fake to stay polite, the kind that rises up out of you like a window being cracked open after too long. The next 2 days passed without a word. Then the baby shower invitation arrived. The envelope was pale pink, thick with that expensive cardstock feel, and had no return address. Just my name written again in that perfect cursive. the same handwriting that once signed my permission slips and now delivered emotional ambushes. Inside was a baby shower invitation. Alex was pregnant. There'd been no call, no announcement. Just this, a printed card like a billboard for amnesia. It read, "Please join us to celebrate the upcoming arrival of baby Ava. Hosted with love by Mom and Dad." At the bottom was a registry link. I clicked it. Organic onesies, a $700 stroller, monogrammed blankets, pastel wall art that cost more than a week's groceries. Nearly $3,000 in items. The kind of list that assumes someone will always pick up the tab. I turned the card over. On the back in a different pen, my mother's were the words, "Let's put the past behind us. Family comes first." I almost laughed. Family comes first when it's convenient, when it looks good in photos, when it doesn't include the people who make them feel small. The next morning, Aunt Cordelia called. She started with pleasantries about the kids, then slipped into the script. "You might not be coming to the shower," she asked softly. I didn't answer. "Delara, don't punish the baby for what your mom said." I reminded her that my kids were also babies, once babies who were forgotten, set aside for convenience. She went quiet, then hung up without saying goodbye. The next day, another message, this time from a third number I didn't recognize. It was my mother. "Don't come for me. Come for your niece. She deserves better than this bitterness." I didn't block her. I didn't reply. I just stared at the message until the screen dimmed. They didn't miss me. They missed control. The part of me that stayed quiet, reliable, useful. I dropped the invitation in the drawer beside the expired coupons and took the kids to the library. That night, we made pancakes for dinner and played board games until they collapsed in laughter. They said there wasn't room for us. That's fine. I've built my own.